Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the UMBC Terrace Campus and the Winter Wellness Series that began 2 weeks ago, and this is our third workshop and noon hour talk. Unfortunately, Megan and Renee and Morris will not be able to join us today because of weather and roads. They're driving in from the Nass Valley. And so what we're going to do is change the format a little bit to bring the audience together collectively to share. Perhaps you are using some of the medicinals yourself, or you have something that popped up through the last couple of weeks that you'd like to also comment on a use that you are using. So it'll just be an open sharing. I want to begin by acknowledging the Tsimshian territory, and particularly the sister communities of Kitsim-Kalem and Kitsalas, who we live right in the heart between them, with hands clasped here in Terrace. So I want to acknowledge particularly the Tsimshian people that are here today, and thank you for coming, and let's begin. And thank you, Alex, for doing all the setup. So again, my name is Marianne Laval. I'm the Aboriginal Services Coordinator here on campus. I also teach in the Faculty of School of Education, and just really glad to be part of being here. Okay, so if you'd like to, I just want to comment that today, yesterday at 2:45 in the morning, the solstice began, where the dance between the sun and the earth and our life here on this planet began to change. For me, and for many people, it is the beginning. It's a real calendar year because it's earth-based, it's universal-based. So I'm just very pleased that everyone is here. And there's particularly like a 4-day period where the sun just kind of lingers there, thinks about that turning point. It doesn't happen all of a sudden, the solstice, but it actually has a pause. And I just want to say that it's kind of this quiet that comes over. So I feel very, very sad that Megan and the crew can't be here, but also very honored that we still have the opportunity to get together today. So perhaps we'll just begin. If you want to share your first name, and we'll just begin the circle, which is always a movement that's very beautiful, very sacred and inclusive. So my name is Marianne.
My name is Avia.
Diana.
I'm Beth.
Kathy.
Alberta.
Lori.
I'm Kara. Danielle.
Everly.
Linda. Brenda.
Sabina.
Sherry.
Maggie.
Kurt. Robert. And Bob. I'm the helper.
I also wanted to let you know that after 1 o'clock, I have given Bob tobacco, which is a traditional offering to request support and help for today, but also he is available and willing if anybody would like to have a smudge and to have a cleansing to start your new year off. He is going to be available at 1 o'clock to smudge anyone down using the Eagle fan, which Bob is a sundancer. Under our Sundance chief is Uncle Leonard Crow Dog. If some of you are familiar with what's going on with the Dakota Access Pipeline, there was a request to forgive the military folks for their part in oppressing Indigenous peoples. If you saw that on video, the elder they were speaking to and who received and bestowed his forgiveness is Uncle Leonard Crow Dog, and that's my Sundance chief and also Bob's as well. So if you knew Uncle Leonard's story, you would know how huge a moment that was for him. Uncle Leonard was schooled by his mother and his grandparents and all the way up the line. And he also had a vision to help heal all people of all colors, all races. And so I just want to acknowledge Uncle Leonard because what's happening in the Dakotas is right near his home and his home territory as well. So that's just a little piece of information. So Bob is a sun dancer. We both are from through the Lakota traditions, and he's willing to provide you with a smudging if you'd like, which will happen afterward. Okay? Yeah.
Just want to say, if we could do it, we could do this during the session. I mean, I'll sit back there and be available. Anybody wants to smudge, just come and see me. We'll go in the back room.
If you'd like to do it that way, that would be fun.
Or did you have something else in mind?
That
No?
would be fine. It's
Okay.
just we don't know if we'll set off the water. We don't. We'll have to open the windows, but it should be okay. One of the dreams I have is to one day build a cultural center here on campus, so that we can have gatherings and not have to move around classrooms and smudge away and do all those things that really nurture us. I could talk a little bit about smudging if people are not familiar with that, or perhaps Bob, would you like that? Okay, smudging. Would you like to?
Sure.
Okay.
Smudging is like a cleansing. We use primarily sage, and it's like just cleaning, and you can sort of drop your day, especially if you run into something emotional, let's say road rage or whatever, right? It's perfect for that kind of thing. You can also have just even a little bit of sage if you want. If you can use cedar too, because sage doesn't grow around here very readily, right? It goes out by Merritt and that very well. Alberta, a lot of the dry country. But you can use cedar, put it a little bit in a frying pan too, and just sort of bring it to yourself. So that's what we do.
It's a good way to restart. It really reaches into the fullness of every cell of your body, and also your auric field, and similar to what Megan spoke about with the pine trees, there's a release. And so what we're doing is we're taking those aromatic oils through the burning of them and having them, brought over the body. Now the eagle fan, we work with as a helper to help to remove and then replenish. If some of you are familiar with just aromatherapy or that type of thing, and clearing your energy field, then that's what it is. Design. It's very, very old. Every tradition has had some form of spiritual, mental, emotional, psychological cleansing. The Scottish people, they had theirs. There's not a person or a race on this earth that didn't have some form of that. On the coast, they actually used like the Coast Salish. They use cold water bathing as well. So there's some use water, some use the smoke. It really depends. If you have sensitive airways, hopefully it will go out, and
That's why I'm doing it in the back.
will create a better barrier here. Anybody have another thing they would like to contribute to what smudging has either done for them or what it means to them? And contribute to our collective knowledge here.
It's not also cleansing of our energy. Like for myself, I highly believe in the positive, negative energy. Like you should be in the presence of a person or people that that drink and smoke and do drugs. I try to be away from that environment, and for myself, that's what I use to cleanse away that energy, because it's not an energy I like to carry around.
Thank you.
If you don't have sage or smudging available, I've simply used intention and just intended to clear my field just with my hands as well. So intention can work for a good hot shower, just clearing that energy field.
And we use the devil's club.
Devil's Club? Uh-huh.
I was just going to ask more about the cold water when you mentioned that, just because myself and a few other people where I work at Commodity Friendship Society, we do have sensitivities to the sage. So as much as I like the idea of doing it, I pay for it almost immediately afterwards, since a few of my coworkers have asthma. And so is there something else that we could do in a building that wouldn't create so much?
Yeah, so there are other ways to do that. Some people do use water as the agent, and so they'll. I was explained by a very young woman who was very, very wise. So she was an elder in a very young body, and had been raised. She taught me how to take sweetgrass water and how to prepare sweetgrass water, and also do something similar. So even in the Catholic Church, you know, some of you grew up in that, you know, they would sprinkle the water, or you would enter any temple or any church or any place where there's a spiritual devotion. There was always some form of how can you cleanse themselves. In the Catholic Church, there was blessed holy water. So yes, I think that smudging, the smudge is deliberate in its intention, and I've met many people that have sensitivities to things, but somehow the way they're receiving the smudge and who is doing it and how it's happening can override sometimes. So it really is very dependent. Some people are burning things that I personally wouldn't burn, because I hand harvest. We hand harvest all of our own things, with one exception, and that's the white sage in California, which is an endangered species of sage. And so, and it's very pungent. And the white sage also tends to be one of the more kind of allergic in that sense. For many people can tolerate white sage, but sometimes prairie sage can be harder to tolerate. So we asked this plant. So there is that connection, and Megan spoke about it. That connection to the plant, and the person that is schooled and has been taught how to do this, and what the intention. And that's why for some of us, like especially sun dancers, rain dancers, people that have been schooled by elders, understand how to treat these plants and with that respect. So I'm not saying that anyone should expose themselves. It's totally your choice, but there are alternatives. Absolutely. One of the things we do when we don't have water, because often at the Sundance we don't touch water, we don't drink water for 4 days. Our relationship with water is very sacred. We deny ourselves water. So what we'll do is we'll take a piece of white sage like this, and we'll crush it or put it in a tiny piece of cloth and crush it, and then we smell that. So if I'm going to pass the white sage around, and if you'd like to take a little piece and do that, even warming it up in your hand, and then we inhale like that. So that's that kind of wonkin, that sacred relationship with scent. Scent is one of our strongest senses, and it can transport us through time, space, and bring you right back to. I remember walking into somebody's house, and everybody's house has a smell. Our house smells like sage, but I walked into this person's house, and I was immediately transported to about age 7, And my girlfriend across the street, the Freezes, they had the same smell in their house. And I was just, and sometimes I'm in a hurry and I just ignore these things, but I just paused and I took in that smell. And I took in that love for that friend who I haven't seen since childhood. And scent just has this incredible power on our nervous system. Sabina.
Yeah, I agree. Scent is incredibly important and takes you back memories and all sorts of things. But the skin is the largest organ that we have. And I apply clary sage every day to my skin. How does that relate or compare to inhaling? What's the difference there? Do you think there is a difference, or?
So how are you administering it?
Just 2 or 3 drops a day.
Of the essence?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm. That's also something that Megan suggested.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was actually online with somebody who's on a budget, and trying to resolve lots of issues, particularly in his case it was constipation and that type of thing. So I must have given about 20 things that I have used over the years. And one of the things that I use as well is essential oils. But I said if you're on a budget and you're not splashing it and putting it on, just the scent of those earthy scents. You can buy those tiny little bottles. Like I have a favorite company, I won't mention it, somebody's, but you can buy this. But the clary sage is one of the powerful. Sage is a pungent and stringent. It's a hot plant. If you harvest it and you don't attend to it, it will actually just melt. It will disintegrate. It needs immediate attention and care. And it's a hot plant, or if you put it in a hot area, like we harvest it and put it in our car. If we're not careful to air it out, it will just melt into water. So often and some of you might have Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine and other backgrounds, you balance. If you have a hot condition, you balance it with a cool. Cedar, for example, is a cold plant. If you work with cedar and rub it, it will start to draw all the heat from your hands. And it will be very hard to, if you're working with bare hands, to restore that heat. It takes a while, that circulation, it pulls. Sage on the other hand is a warm plant. So again, helping cut through, it cuts through mucus. In the Sundance, we call it a cleansing tea. If we do have water, we won't have water straight, or if somebody is really suffering, they'll put a little bit of sage in that. It's also a purgative. If somebody has drank some poison or something and you have sage, and you can actually boil that, and if you drank enough of it, they'll vomit, they'll purge what's there. So it cuts through energy. That's why it's strong. It's stringent, it's hot, and it's purgative.
How would you store it? The best way to store it?
In the open air and in the dark. Like anything that has essential oils, cool and dark generally is how you're going to store your medicines. Like we have a little medicine room or closet where, in the basement where it's cooler, it's dark, void of light. That's how you're going to preserve those essential oils the best. Sage is pretty hardy. It will stay kind of, you have old sage and it's sitting out on the counter and it's still as good as the day we prepared it.
I'm going to pass this one around too. This is a sage from the Blackfoot Reserve out in southeast Alberta. Very different. One of the things we do with this is that if you don't want to smudge and you're not feeling good, right, especially emotionally, right, you just take a little tiny piece, put it under your tongue, and go ahead and try it. You see, it is very strong, right? You don't need a lot. Anyway, I'll smudge with this as well. I'll pass it around.
And help yourself to a tiny.
The white sage, like this, Marion said, It only grows about 30 or 40 miles east of Los Angeles. It's the only place in the world that grows. So you see a lot of people sometimes gather it and then sell it in stores, right? We don't feel good about that. I don't. It's like it's so rare. It grows on a bush. This sage here grows close to the ground, right? This grows in a bush, and it comes out like in a bunch, and you bring the bunch together and then tie it up together. That's how it ends up in these things. It's the easiest sage in the world to pick and to gather, right? But the leaves, it is too. You just need one leaf, and it'll last you a long time.
And they feel like velvet.
Yes.
They're velvety.
So how long does it take from the green stage, to actually being able to burn it?
This is never green.
It's never green.
No, it's always this color.
I mean fresh or soft?
I don't know. We just sort of do it, and when it's dry, it's dry.
You can use it immediately.
Yeah.
You can use it
Will it
immediately.
burn? Will it actually?
Yeah.
It takes a little more fire.
Yep.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
like green cedar, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
When you mentioned that you could burn a little bit of cedar in the frying pan, is that like the bark or the actual wood, or what?
What would you call it?
Chips.
The boughs? Yeah.
Just the
The
little
Oh,
leafy
okay.
things.
Oh, green.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. The leaves are the green part of the cedar. Yeah.
From the tips.
It's a good way, like we talked about, Morris talked a little bit about a wood stove and all that. I have special, well, not special, they're just cast iron pans that are just dedicated. And I put them on the stove and I heat them up, and I'll burn aromatic herbs there as well, for sure.
We also use the cedar at home when we light our fire in the wood stove. We open the door a little bit, right, and we forget it. We just put cedar on top, and it just fills the house like that, and we know to come and close the stove down.
But be very careful and keep an eye on it. Cedar in particular is very flammable. If you put too much, you'll have a flame. So
It's very oily.
whenever you're doing these things, you're doing them with that consciousness, that mindfulness, that intention, and safety in mind. But if you burn cedar, it will flame. Yeah, so make sure you don't have long sleeves. I mean, we're so natural about it. Just be careful.
I'm wondering, Spotted Lake between Sluice and on Highway 3, does that sage there have any different properties?
Well, interesting you would say that. There is, in nature, it's just kind of funny, but there are lookalikes and mimics.
Mhm.
And there's, and they often live amongst the one that you want and then the one you don't want. And there is one called, it's so beautiful, and it has a special color, and it almost has its best dress on, so it draws you in. You go, oh, I want that sage, because that sage looks kind of dirty and not so colorful. This one has just got a kind of a hue to it that is just draws you in. And it's a skunk sage. And when you burn it, it actually smells like skunk.
Oh
Now,
my
some of us, I'm one of those weird ones, I actually quite kind of like the smell of skunk. Anybody else?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cabbage is one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
skunk
Mhm.
cabbage. See, I kind of, now, but you just don't want too much of it, right? It's one of those things, and it's that sulfur. And for some of us, that sulfur is like a natural antibiotic. It actually has a medicinal property. But the skunk sage is kind of beautiful, but you kind of know that something. A friend of ours went to pick sage for us, a Sundance, and she was so proud, but she was a novice and nobody went with her, but she wanted to do this, and so she went. She came back with tons, and this is a lot of work, of skunk sage, and we're all like at the ceremony, and we're like, this is stinky, what's stinky? And some of us hadn't really encountered skunk sage, but we ended up with a lot of skunk sage, and we moved over to using almost entirely cedar.
I want to add that she drove from Courtenay to Kelowna to pick it. She just didn't go down the road, right? She took the whole trip to go get all this sage. We
She's so
couldn't use it.
beautiful.
But is there any regular sage? Like, I know what you're talking of,
Yeah.
and that's where they've got it cordoned off. And it's very beautiful, and I see lots of people picking it for its beauty, probably because I think it's beautiful sage. But I've noticed the difference in the smell.
Yeah,
And
actually.
I've wondered, and partly because it's in such an
Yes.
unusual environment there.
Yes, so for example, we know where we picked our sage. So Karamias is one of the places we do. There's another place, there's a rest stop on the border of the Saskatchewan and Alberta border. We've done a lot of picking there. So you actually get to know these spots. And each sage, you're right, it has its own little nature, its own little twist, because of the nutrients that are coming through the ground.
That's
So
Saskatchewan.
we have we actually, not that we're connoisseurs, but we actually, like Bob knows exactly where he got this, and it's important to know, and to know its story. That was picked during this Sundance too.
The rest stop is that on Highway 1?
Highway
Trans
1,
Canada.
Highway 1 rest stop, right on the border. What's that little funny town? Anyway, and all in the back there. And so some places you don't want to go in because it's farmers' fields, but that one's kind of, it's a nice little spot.
We always put tobacco down, and we wait for it to show itself to us.
You could be looking for something, and until you give a gift and have that conversation and honor the plant, only then will it show you where it is. It's like having a curtain pulled, over your eyes if you don't talk to it, and then it opens, and all of a sudden, that's all you can see. But prior to that, it's invisible. And that's those other sides about picking medicine that are so that intricacy, and not over harvesting a lot of those things that Megan has covered. The ethics behind it.
My husband and I, my husband is from southern Manitoba. I'm familiar with that campground, and for years I didn't understand because he didn't say the word Métis. It was a bad word to admit to being. And so he didn't say that he was Métis, but it was so obvious he was. We would go home to the prairies and it would be, gotta go where Grandma gets her tea. Gotta go where Grandma gets sad. Or Uncle Joe did this, or whatever. We just hit all the spots where we picked Seneca root, and we always looked for the turtle eggs. And sometimes he planned going down there around when he thought the turtle eggs might have just hatched, so we could see the trails. Those are things that have been there for hundreds of years. And we go back, I'm going back this summer, and I will make the pilgrimage to all these spots. And they'll all be there. Nothing changes. It's a very small rural community. And I have a quarter section of land that has many of these roots and vegetables. And we took Grandma one time, who was 90 some odd, boosted her in the truck, took her out, she directed us through the bush. Now this bush, we've had the property 50 years. And so it's 50 years older than it was. Through there, she hollered, stop. I helped her out, and I thought, hell, I can hardly walk, I'm not going through the bush. Clomp, clomp through the bush. She came back with a handful of blackberries. Where the hell did you get them from? Oh, she said, my sister and I planted them, figured out the year, and she said, there they are. No one has tended to that bush in 50 years. Mary walked out, went straight to the bush and said there. And then the I remember stories. There is so much value in the heritage and the things that God put there, because they're always there. Unless, of course, we interfere, but anyway. But he was just so traditional without even realizing it. It's quite awesome.
I just want to add that I've tried to use kitchen sage, for cooking, and I've always been disappointed. It's like, it just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah, some of the domestic sages that you can plant, and some people do use that, like culinary sage, but it is I don't know if they've deliberately milded it down, but almost anything wild, if you taste a wild strawberry, you know what we're talking about, the intensity of those. And I think, just a little aside, but like in France, where they really have a high regard for their food, and they don't eat large amounts, but they eat really high quality quality things, like things that are straight right, from the grower to the table. Not everyone, of course, but that was my experience when I had a little visit there this past spring. But it's sort of that same thing. It's not it's about the intensity of the flavors and not the amounts of food. And I think in Canada, North America, probably in general, we've gotten used to focusing on amounts, quantity versus that quality. So the wild medicines are similar. If I have a little bit of osha or bear root, what we collect in the mountains as well, and often when we're smudging, we'll use other medicines like osha. Again, very pungent, and you don't need very, very much, and it just, lifts the spirit. That one is especially good for people that are grieving losses, and it just won't, or depression, nothing seems to be able to cut through and reach that pain. Osha will find its way, that's that bear root. And the bear is seen as the closest, like some people call the primates are close to human. In my family, and amongst many Cree people, it's the bear that is the closest human relative that we had. Because when if you were to look at the skeletal of the bear, it's like my grandfather say, it's like a man wearing a heavy coat. Mm-hmm. And the hip bones and the hands and so the bear is kind of that being that helped teach us about the right things to eat and the medicines.
I just want to add around the osha root is finally it's considered as gold amongst ceremonial people, but it's also very difficult to find. It's in high mountain, and it's very important. It's one of those plants that you pick or roots that you pick that you have to know what you're doing, because there's an alternate that's right next to it that is also very, in the case of the osha root, it's the hemlock, the water hemlock, right? Which only a little piece of it can kill a cow. Mm-hmm. Right? So you have to know what you're doing. And there are certain ways of doing it so that it doesn't draw difficulties to you, right? And now that's sort of like part of that spiritual approach. The other thing I wanted to add, when you're picking sage, right? If you decide you want to pick sage, it depends where you grew up, right? If you grew up like I did in the prairies, or you grew up here, you can go pick cedar or whatever, and you don't have to worry too much. But if you pick sage in sage country, like really good sage, you're also in rattlesnake country, right? So it's important to keep your head up. The rattlesnakes, they like the little corners where the sage grows, so it's good to keep your head up.
Yeah, so harvesting demands a kind of a harmony, kind of finding yourself in a good place, and preparing. When we go harvesting, we'll prepare, we'll smudge, we'll cleanse, we'll put offerings down, and it'll just go so much better, right? And you have the intention, or if I get a call and somebody is ill, then I'm going and I'm thinking about that person, or I'm thinking about that condition. And so the right things kind of light up, the right things show themselves to you. And it's not really ooey. We all operate we all have an intuitive part of ourselves. And so it is about really tuning in to other levels of communication that is happening between you and plants in the natural world. And we, as human beings, are designed to pick up on these subtle messages. We might have to do lots of, clearing, in a sense. And that's where going with seasoned harvesters for a little while to learn and watch how they approach it. You begin to learn the language they're using, and then you borrow that for a time until you find your own way to, and your own approach. because everyone's different. I've worked with lots of Indigenous people. Some people only have one element they work with. They don't work with a broad bunch of medicines. They work with one thing, and that's all they were given, and that's all they worked. And there's a reason for that, and my elders have talked a lot about that. Uncle Rela Valley, the late Uncle Rela Valley, it was a way to distribute the knowledge, so nobody could be like above anyone. Everybody had a part to play. There wasn't there wasn't a way to structure hierarchy. It was a way to structure circles, unity. Everybody has a way of seeing. Everybody has a knowledge, and it's all very, very important and very sacred, very important. So.
I'm just going to sit in the back. Anybody who wants a smudge, just come find me.
And anybody else have anything? Either questions or thoughts? Both of my daughters are here now too.
A question, Marion. Is it important or is it more effective to be treated with plant medicines from the land that you belong to, so to speak? So am I going to react differently or to a plant from my place of growing up and maybe someone from another country or something I'm thinking, would they have the same response? Because you're talking about associations as well. So I'm smelling the skunk cabbage and I'm transported even before I consume it. Am I making sense?
Yes, of
Is
course.
it as effective for
What's your
anyone?
belief on that? What's your belief?
Well, I guess I know my own response. So you're making fireweed tea, and I see the color and the smells and the outdoors and the fresh even before I drink it. So it's already begun to work. So does that happen? And is that as effective for the person who's grown up in a country where they don't grow fireweed? What is your...
I can comment, but does anyone else have a comment? Because I'm kind of more...
I think everybody's perspective is different, and our thoughts and beliefs are different. But also in saying that, it doesn't mean that we don't believe what you get out of it. We also get out of what you're getting, but we don't do what you do, but we use something similar to what you're using. Like for myself, for smudging and for cleansing, we would rather use the Devil's Club. And there's another one he was talking about. It's kind of like a bean, and you can only get in the mountain. Around here they call it the rootin'. It's a very, very powerful. And that's why I was saying if a person is drinking, smoking, and doing drugs, that person would not be given that rootin' at all, because it's so powerful. And she was asking about the cleansing without having to use smoke kind of thing. The Devil's Club as well can be used, like some people use it as a smudging, like to burn, to smoke it. But you can also use the shavings to boil it and bathe in it, or just wash yourself with it. That would be another way of using it.
Thank you. I think that I have two thoughts about that. I'm from Saskatchewan. I wasn't born here, so I'm getting exposed to plants that I had no exposure to as a child. Fireweed is a good example. Devil's Club is a good example. And I'm really benefiting strongly from these plants that I have had no exposure to. And I'm very glad to have met them. And Indigenous people have been trading for centuries in order to what's plentiful here, wood and Devil's Club, bear root, all the mountain medicines, but I haven't encountered fireweed as one. I think they don't know about that one yet. Have been traded for sage and things that are plentiful, sweetgrass and things that only grow in certain places. So there's always, I think, an affinity. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience. And then sometimes I do that. I'll walk in the grocery store and I can't find the food that I have some kind of a memory about, and I've never seen this food. And I'm walking, but I have a feeling that one day, if I ever have the opportunity to go to India and go to the markets, I'm gonna find what I'm looking for. Because I have a kind of like a little hunger for something, but I don't know what I'm looking for. So if you can relate to that, because I'm not a world traveler. I've now had my first trip to Europe and it was beautiful. And on what I went for largely, I wanted to smell the air. That was my biggest curiosity. I wanted to smell the earth. I wanted to, in different parts, and smell it and smell the air. That was what I was craving. So I think there's two minds to that question. I think, yes, that we use what strengthens us, but I think we also, as a human, we are migratory. We have, the prairie people, we migrated. We didn't have territory. So we reached out, we traded, we are seekers as well. That's why we're all over the place as well. We make our homes in many places.
I think too is, I mean, there's benefits to all of it, but we have intuition, so it's what connects with you. And something may connect on a different level to other people, so when you have that gut feeling of, I just, love the smell of this, or I'm drawn to this, there's a reason for that, right? So go with your intuition is a big part of it, I think.
I agree. My granddaughter, I was babysitting her on the weekend, and I had a pineapple on the cupboard, and all day she was wanting that pineapple, right from the morning. I said, no, that's for supper, that's for supper. And she asked for that pineapple. I'm such a mean grandma. But I had a plan for that pineapple. Anyway, the pineapple ended up going home with her. But she got a lot out of just smelling it and looking at it. It wasn't to be mean, and just to give it to her. I wanted her to kind of have a desire, maybe build that attraction a bit before just releasing it to her. She's 3.5 years old. But, she can remember rather than just giving it right away. And we're kind of like that with our medicines too. We don't just kind of give them away. There has to be a form of exchange. Money has become an easy form, but there are other forms of exchange that help us. But, my little granddaughter is going to know more about how the things grow, the bumpy skin, the smell, because she was really salivating over this pineapple. And when I sent it home with her, and we didn't cut it into it, it was about that you have a relationship. So she held that pineapple on to the car. So again, it's about nurturing these connections. And like you were saying, there's these intuitions. And I said to her mom, my daughter Iris, I said, there may be something in this pineapple that she really is needing, that she's really craving. There could be enzymes or something that in her body that was crying out for that, rather than just the food of it.
Can we open the window? She's getting
Yeah.
bothered.
Absolutely.
To get back to what Kathy asked, though, to me it seems if you've got, memories and smells and all kinds of positive things working for you before you even sip the tea, then wow, you're lucky to have all of that. So I guess what I was hearing Marion say is that we may receive benefits from plants that don't grow where we are growing right now, but boy, if you've got all of that taking you back to wonderful, positive, life-enhancing memories before you even sip the tea, you're in a value-added kind of situation. Like I could just sort of feel how nourishing smell, the memory, the scent memories. Was.
It's strong.
I forgot about the pineapple for 2 days on the counter, and then she finally asked me every day for it, and I finally cut it open for her. And she was just like, I got it back. It's interesting. It's a fruit from the tropical area, but we still have. We're lucky in this age that we have access to these fruits, and our bodies still want them. So that might say something in relation to the medicines too, countries or areas. But I like what you comment on. Like, I think it's important to know about the medicines from where our genealogy is originated, and there might be some medicines that you might be more drawn to there. Yeah. Where are you from? If you don't mind me asking. Here?
Terrace.
Oh, okay.
So that's what I say, there's all those associations, but then the question
Yeah.
being, if you're from Europe,
Yeah.
it can be more effective for me than for you.
So we just have about 5 minutes left for this part, and you're welcome to stay after. I've made some teas. I've put some bush tea together, some echinacea blossom tea. I even have one if you're a little on the, I have some cascara bark tea, but very light, but be careful with that one. I'll show you. It's the one with the stick in there. Very, very potent. So if you have constipation or something, very helpful, but if you're loose, not so helpful. So, but it's there. But just watch out for that one. But just a tiny bit, and mix it with some water. With all of these, I've made a concentrated form. So just take a little bit in the bottom. That's what I do. I'll make concentrated forms, and then I'll add hot water or warm water to them, and keep them in the fridge. That's how I sometimes get my medicinals in. So these are all in the jars, concentrated forms. So just top it up with a good chunk of water, hot or cold, however you prefer. But the essence had been brought out through very hot.
So the echinacea flower, what would that tea be beneficial
Echinacea, again, a very, very, very important herb. I grow my own, and I grew mine for, I guess, 7 years, 6, 7 years before I picked it. And often we'll go for the root, but because they don't restore, that's it. As far as what I've been able to manage here. On the prairies too, the purple coneflower is one of the most precious and dying species as well. It's very endangered. The wild one, right? So we have these commercial ones that we can kind of get by with, but the real wild ones, I've picked the medicine ones. They have a long, long taproot, and they'll grow 50, 60 years, so they have a long history too. And we never cut it too deep, even though it'll go incredibly long into the ground. You're going into history there. So, and the indigenous people, what they do then is they'll cut that, then they'll turn the plant upside down. I learned this from Rick this summer. They'll turn the seed pod back into the hole that you dug, and those seeds then go and they join up with that root. So the new plant starts, but it grafts itself to the root that you left behind, and that's how they do it. So when you go picking, you'll sometimes see a taproot that has a little bump in the road, and it goes down. That's where someone picked it years prior, because it's usually 7 or 8 years before it's mature enough to have the medicinal properties, the echinacea. Now, I'll tell you from my experience with the others, and that's where they'll have that it'll graft itself to that root, the new plant. So again, that taking care of the earth, taking care of the species. So I use it because as an immune booster, a cleanser. It's just, I try to keep mine as long as possible, because even our sight, I was telling this gentleman online the other day, brighten up your wardrobe. Wear some, if you have constipation, wear yellow, wear orange, wear some of those warm, bright colors. because, and have people even around you, they stimulate the brain and they'll stimulate our whole system. Echinacea for me, when I see that plant, enlivens and it's like it makes me happy. It's like an endorphin release, and that's, you know, scent. And even looking at a color, if you feel sad or something, find a color that you can look at and that really speaks to you, and just look at that color. That's why Cree people, we use cloths or flags. We use these colors, and they work on our mental, emotional, psychological, and work on the physical. The physical is the last thing to change. So why not work with the things that work the quickest? Our brain is very fast, but the body can be, you know, lagging behind. So I'd like just to spend a minute just saying, if you have feedback of what the kinds of things you want to learn about and would like to do, or maybe there's a talent or something you have that you would like to have, you know, have the space to express that, please let me know, because there's so much collective knowledge and or stories that are so important that we need to give away freely. Sometimes I wonder if what's kind of gotten us, our physical bodies, a bit in trouble is that we're just really not giving of ourselves in ways that encourage us and we expose ourselves to other people. So I'm very open to that, to try to provide you with the space, just like I have with Megan.
Perhaps people could use the survey of the course?
Yes.
Get back to you on that?
Absolutely. If you're on my list, then you will have a survey. And actually, I did get the little rose hip. Thank you for that, Sabina. And there is a little recipe that Megan did give around the rose hip recipe. I was going to print it off for the 1 o'clock, but since we're not going to have that, because Megan got stuck on the road with the road, so we decided to do a survey.
Did she leave any of her medicines here?
No.
Purchase or took them?
No, she didn't. Yeah.
She was asking about the smudging. We don't have any of these items. Eagle feather that looks like, I was talking about the person that hasn't done drugs or stuff like that. That person can help you. Like eagle feathers are very powerful, very powerful. So somebody could brush you off.
Precisely. Yes, Indigenous people, we have a lot of ways, and the deeper you go, the more beautiful it gets, and the more mysterious. And there is a place where you kind of have to put a part of yourself in part, and just open the door to something else, to move the energy. Because if you could move it yourself, you would have. And that's the balancer. You actually have to reach out and ask somebody else. So it's no good to have just a whole cabinet of your own little herbs and you're doing your own thing. It's cherish. Open up your medicine cabinet, like the herbal. Open yourself up to exchange and helping each other. We have to help each other. But there's no other way we're going to make it if we don't reach out.
I just want to commend Bob's incredible smudging. That is the most powerful smudging I have ever experienced. So it shows that as a sun dancer, as a man of history with the lineage, the power that came through felt like I'd been in a pipe ceremony in 2 minutes. So do not miss that smudging opportunity.
I agree.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
Powerful.
He's a magic man.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming, and thank you, Alex, for helping us record this precious moments and the precious knowledge. Hope I didn't talk too much. And thank you, Bob, for providing that opportunity. There's tea available. I Again, hi Megan, let's all say hi to Megan and
Hi,
hi Megan. We love you and I'm glad you didn't take the risk. We did okay.
Yes.
Okay, all my relations.